Hey guys, Nick Jeremy here. I just want to thank you all for downloading, listening, and supporting the show. Today's episode is going to be fun and exciting, and I really enjoyed this interview. So stay tuned, you won't regret it. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Welcome to Do I Talk Too Much? With your host, the one and only, the man with a plan, the man who slaps the bass, the man whose nickname is from the galaxy. Your man, Nick Jeremy. Well, guys, welcome to episode 2 of Do I Talk Too Much? Because I do talk too much. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed episode 1. If you haven't listened to episode 1, go to YouTube, listen to it. It was really good. I really enjoyed that interview with John O'Leary. It was great. He even told me he listened to it yesterday, and he enjoyed it. It has 18 views. I'm good with that. So if 18 people have listened to it, awesome. So I'm not about ratings or whatever, or having millions of people listening to it. I know it's just episode 1, and just the beginning. So I'm excited for 18 views. Thank you, Lord, for 18 views. Anyways, before we get into today's interview, which was about 3 hours, I could cut it down to make it one episode, but it was so good because it was so in depth, into the mind of Stephen Howell that I had to do a 2-parter. So, but before I get into the interview, I wanted to talk to you guys about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was about 2 weeks ago. And Thanksgiving for me growing up was about family. You saw Thanksgiving decorations everywhere you went, at stores. And now, these days, it's not even, once they introduced Black Friday, it's just now Thanksgiving is about Black Friday. So whenever Thanksgiving comes up, it's about Black Friday instead of being thankful for what we have and being thankful for our family. We eat and then we rush off to Black Friday. And don't get me wrong, it's great. You want to save money? Go save money. But if you have to take away the one day out of the year that, maybe you only get together with your family because they live everywhere around the world, around this country. I was going to say around the world, maybe around the world. But this one day that you guys can all come together and enjoy each other, instead of enjoying that, you're planning to go Black Friday. Thanksgiving should be more than just Black Friday. If you want to go at midnight and make it a family thing, do it. If you all decided to, hey, let's eat and then let's go Black Friday shopping as a family, then that's your prerogative. But growing up, as a kid, Thanksgiving was just about spending time with your family. And yeah, we had turkey and all that stuff. But, food is just, food brings everybody together. If you said, hey, I'm having a pizza party, people are going to come. But Thanksgiving is about being thankful for what you have. I'm thankful for everything I have. The more you get older, the more you start to be thankful for the little things. The younger you are, you think, you have your whole life ahead of you. And I still do have my whole life ahead of me. But, I cherish, every moment. Especially now that I'm a father, of a 3-year-old toddler. I cherish every moment. And, I just think Thanksgiving isn't where it used to be. I don't think it is as important as it should be these days. Now stores open Black Friday on Thursday when it used to just be Fridays. Now it's Thursdays, and now families are racing to the stores to get, discounts on, TVs and stuff, and people are fighting over TVs. It's taken away from what it was meant to be in the first place, and it's your family getting together and enjoying each other's company. Maybe family members that you haven't seen in a while, like I said before, come into town. It's just to enjoy and be thankful for what you have, and just the blessing that God has given you. I know we should be thankful for the things God's given us every day, but that Thanksgiving, I think it's more should be like a family reunion thing. We're all busy, we all have our lives, and all of a sudden we have this one day, but we don't do nothing, we're not working. Well, I had to work, but we come together and we have a meal, and we enjoy that meal, and we enjoy each other's company. We play football or watch football. Before this whole Black Friday came about, the only people that were working on Thanksgiving were probably EMTs, police officers, and NFL football players. but hey, that's just my thought. I don't think Thanksgiving is as family oriented as it used to be. But I'm gonna change that. I'm always gonna make it family oriented with me and my son. And that's just how it is. I'm not a big fan of Black Friday anyways, because I know it can get crazy. So, it is what it is. I'm not saying if you go Black Friday shopping, you don't care about your family. I'm not saying that. Please don't twist my words. I'm just saying that, it's not the way it used to be. So, they used to, like I said, they used to decorate for Thanksgiving. And now, after Halloween is over, you see Christmas. And now it's all about getting gifts, and that's a whole nother story. So, but that's it. That's my spiel on Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed it with your family. I hope you felt blessed to be around, the people you love. I enjoyed my Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, I didn't get to be around my son because I had to work that day. But, we have a lot more Thanksgivings to spend time together. So I'm staying positive. One more thing. If you're listening to this Friday, Monday I start my job. Start my new job. It was a blessing from God, and I'm thankful for that job. So just pray for me. Pray that everything goes well, and that I learn everything, because I'm going to be training for 16 weeks to do this job. And I really needed it. I was strapped financially for a long time. And, God blessed me with this. So, I'm thankful for everything God has given me. My son, my job, place I live, a car, clothes on my back, food in my refrigerator. My health. I wish he can heal my knee, though. It kind of does hurt all the time. But he can, and he will. So, but anyways, let's get into our conversation with Mr. Stephen Howell. Like I said, it was 3 hours. I enjoyed it. I got to know Stephen more and, understand his way of thinking and why he does certain things. I'm a kind of an observant person. I like to, why does that person act that way? Why do they do the things they do type person? When I'm in a room, 75% of the time, I'm observing. I'm observing people's behavior. I'm just seeing I just like to see how people interact with each other and why they act certain ways and why they do what they do. Because I try to figure them out or whatever. And, I always been like that. Even as a kid, I was like that. Just observing people. So, that's just how it is. So, let's get into this interview. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a 2-part episode. So, we're going to do half of the interview today and the other half next week. I love you guys. Be thankful. I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving. Let's get into this interview with Stephen Howell. everybody. Welcome back. We're here sitting with Stephen. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
How you doing today?
Pretty good.
All right. So let's start off with a simple question. What do you do for a living?
Well, when you work at a church, so first of all, I work at a church. But when you work at a church, sometimes they give you a title, but it doesn't really matter what your title is because you're going to do multiple things anyways. So,
Like Walmart?
yeah. Yeah, so my focus is really on youth music and kind of youth creative as far as like stage design, videos, production team. And then also I help out with the main service, song selection, and the way that they kind of run things. Kind of a younger voice into that. As well as this new upcoming service we have coming at the beginning of the year. I'll do a lot of the music for that. So all of those things is my job.
Do you do anything other than that?
You mean outside of the church?
Yeah.
I do like side project stuff with carpentry things, with building stuff. Because the job that I had before was I built modern industrial furniture. So that was kind of a skill that I was able to learn for about 2.5 years. And then I kind of took that into side projects. I'm still building stuff, but not as much.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you were born, your childhood.
Okay, just in general.
Just in general.
All right, well, we're in Lakeland now. I was born in Lakeland. I was actually born at a birthing center right next to where my parents used to live, right off of Lake Parker. It was like right back behind where the original Red Lobster was. It's pretty cool.
So your parents pretty much just went down the street and you were born.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother was born in the hospital at Lakeland Regional. And after that, my parents didn't want to do that again. I have no idea where my sister was born. I thought she was born in the hospital, but I guess she wasn't. So then I was just born in the birthing center, and quick birth, I guess. That my brother and sister said they went to sleep, and then they woke up, and I was there. So it's kind of an overnight thing.
So you're the baby?
Yeah, youngest of 3.
I remember I was the baby, youngest of 3 for a while, and then my twin sister was born. Stuck me right in the middle.
A few seconds.
So for about 9 years, I was the baby.
Wait, you said your twin sister was born?
Twin sisters.
Oh, I was about to say, your twin sister, now that'd be a joke.
But, all right, so how was it growing up in a Christian family?
It was good. One of the things that's always interesting to me is personalities and tendencies that come with individuals' personalities. And I know for myself, and I get this a lot from my mom, is that I'm more of a analytical person, and so I tend to critique things very quickly. And I think if I hadn't have grown up in the environment that I did, I would be a much more critical person and probably not as upward looking of just things in general. I think the environment that I was raised in kind of pushed me towards positive thinking, even in the way that I viewed God, in the way of God did only good things and kind of pushed you towards what was good. And so it's kind of one of those things where the tendencies that I would naturally have to overanalyze stuff and kind of critique things quickly became overshadowed within my personality towards positive thinking. So for me, it really helped a lot.
So your dad is on staff at the church as well,
yeah.
Correct?
Actually, my whole family is.
Oh, wow. All right. Has your dad always been on staff at a church or in full-time ministry? Or is this something new recently?
Yeah, so my dad, My dad was, he grew up in Fort Meade, which is like 45 minutes to an hour south of Lakeland, like southeast a little bit. And he grew up in kind of a very Southern Baptist house. I think there was like one or two, there was like one Baptist church in Fort Meade, and most people went there. So it was, it wasn't a negative environment, but his father wasn't very good to him necessarily, and so there was some difficulty there, that I think his view of those things and the way that they kind of dealt with God was a little bit more authoritative. So he kind of talks about how when he was like 18, 19, because he was always been a musician. So he played in bands and stuff like that. And he talked about when he was like 18, 19 back in the 70s, and the Jesus movement was happening. He started getting into bands, and he got saved at Assemblies of God Church in Winter Haven. And I say he got saved, but he grew up Baptist. But I think it was more of a decision for him at that point. Whereas before it was just kind of a family. It was just kind of something they did. They went to church, but he personally kind of made that decision around 18 or 19, joined some bands, and then that kind of launched his. When he went to school, he did music at school, and then he ended up managing the Carltons in Winter Haven before they had a Lakeland one, and through that, he started doing sales and stuff, and he met with Pastor Reggie, our lead pastor, and ended up working with him as his manager when Pastor Reggie owned a piano and organ store in the old Lakeland Mall that is now First Baptist at the mall. So that's kind of how they met. And then when the church started, Pastor Reggie sold the business. My dad kept working there. He went out to Tulsa, went to school, came back, planted the church, reconnected with my dad. My dad was the first employee. So, yeah, so my dad musically kind of brought him on. So because of his musical talents and things like that, he was the first worship leader, like worship pastor at Family Worship. And that was 30 years ago. So as far as I'm concerned, he has always done that. But when I was younger, he did take a second job with one of his cousins who owned like an RV. He like sold RVs, and he went and worked with him part time. And that was because one of the things my dad always wanted to do was allow my mom not to work and kind of raise the kids, stay at home, things like that. Since we've left, she works now, but I think that was just a decision early on where he needed to help his cousin out, make some extra money, things like that. So he kind of went part-time and then has been full-time ever since I can remember. So, yeah.
It's crazy how, God just connects people, like your dad started working with Pastor Reggie and bam,
Yeah.
30 years later,
Right.
They're here and the church has grown so much.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All right, so at what age did you have your first encounter with God that you can remember? Like you're like, man, this is real, because I didn't start going to church till, and I didn't get saved till about ninth grade. Before that, I kind of went to church here and there, my family, but, I didn't really get saved until the ninth grade. So even when I went to church as a little kid, it was just going to church. I didn't really think anything about it. Jesus died on the cross, okay?
Yeah.
So when was your first encounter with God?
Well, that stuff's all really interesting to me because of cultural influences. To me, part of the nurture of your immediate family towards you kind of sets some cultural boundaries within your life. So one of the things that I think is interesting is even though I grew up in church and my dad and my mom were constantly there, I was one of the kids that kind of crawled around under the pews when I was younger, and it was just like if there was long services and things like that, I would go in my dad's office and take a nap or something. So I was just constantly there. I was constantly around it. So it's interesting because from what you've said versus my upbringing was that there was more of an entrance to things, and on my end it was kind of like, oh, this isn't just a cultural thing. I came up to a point where I was like, oh, this has been part of my culture, but do I really accept my culture? You know what I mean? So it was one of those things where it's like the same way that I'm partly Italian, I also kind of think of the cultural setting of um, the way I grew up as part of my heritage in a sense. Uh, the same way like Hebrews now are Hebrews, but they're not necessarily Old Testament believing Jewish people. You know, they're just Hebrew because that's how they were born, but they were also culturally brought into this uh, religion. So it's interesting to me that there had to be a choice, I guess. Um, there's a there's a lot of enlightening moments, I guess, along the way, but honestly, I think with anything, there's kind of a living and then a dying and a living and a dying that kind of regularly happens. I think my most significant uh, death in moving forward was when I was 19. Um, but earlier on than that, it was more of a realizing things that were happening, kind of accepting and picking up cultural things. But I don't think I really understood or made a decision to kind of create my own story until I was about 19, because it was part of my culture, you know, like that's from until I could drive when I was 16. Like I went where my parents' cars went, so that's just I was culturally brought up as a Christian, and eventually I made the decision myself. Um, but I think it just happened later because I didn't need for it to happen any earlier. You know?
It's not like you were a bad environment or anything, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
See, with me, it was you know, I didn't feel love from my home, you know, so I was desperate for love,
yeah.
for acceptance,
Sure.
not rejection. And the moment that my first encounter with God was when I was praying, when this guy named Jesse was doing the sinner's prayer with me, and I just like I felt like my heart skipped a beat, like literally, and I was like, "What was that?" And all of a sudden, this presence just fell on me, and it was just like this love that I've never known before. You know,
Yeah.
as a kid, we didn't have that growing up, so it was, you know, that was like my moment right there that I can remember.
Yeah.
So
And see, I love stories like that because, and I'm not saying I don't love my story because I have great appreciation for the moments and things that I had, and I'm such a blessing to have that cultural kind of
yeah,
upbringing of such a good environment. But the thing that I love about your story is that it's legitimately um, the call of the local church. In other words, in your case, the local church is still thriving and existing, meaning that like when Jesus said, "Go out and make disciples," um, this is a 2,000 years later type of thing where you had a desire that you didn't know you had, and then when it came flooding in, it came through the source of the local church, of people being Jesus to the people in that community. And so it's cool to hear those stories, to hear your story, because it's for me it was a cultural thing, and I had to realize I have to choose the culture, not just accept um, that my last name is what my last name is. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I like that because it's like coming into something that's thriving and that still shows love in that way.
yeah. Before I was a little rebel kid. Not that like even though I got saved, not too much changed as far as like um, how I felt about my household. Like I did
Yeah.
everything to get away from there,
Yeah,
but I think it, it planted a seed, and then the next year is when I really, really got into it because we actually didn't have a youth pastor until then.
Sure.
And the moment he told me, "Hey, me and my wife, we love you, so does Jesus," and that was another moment in my life. I was like, "Oh, okay, wow."
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, it's pretty cool. So you said at 19 is when you accepted it, right?
Yeah.
How did that change your life from there on?
Well, one of the things you said is like there was a moment, I guess, of realization and change, but not necessarily everything changed.
Yeah.
One of the things is that I think is interesting is like we talk about being like as Christians, you want to be salt and light.
Mm-hmm.
But when you walk into a room and you flip a light switch on, it illuminates everything. But becoming a Christian is not necessarily like flipping a light switch on, because if you flip it's not that God flips the light switch on and then all of a sudden everything is fixed, but rather the light switch comes on and you see all the things that can be fixed.
Exactly.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, these are all the things that are causing a lot of my struggles and issues and things like that. It's not necessarily like now I can clean them up and they'll go away, but it's more so like it's that moment of like, oh, God has illuminated these things and is with me for the betterment of my life within these things that already exist around me that I couldn't see before. So for me, I think one of the difficulties too is when I grew up culturally in that I learned how to move around rules, meaning that it became much more complicated for me to actually be a Christian and not just show that I was a Christian. Because when it's a cultural thing, it's like you know how to put your pants on the right way, you know how to put your shirt on the right way, you know how to fix certain things and change light bulbs and do this stuff. You know where all the rooms are in the church. You know how to get around stuff. You know how much candy you can steal from the kids' church and not get in trouble. And it's just one of those things where it's like it was almost, and that's why I say it happened later for me, probably because of that, because I had to work through all of these things that I had kind of built around myself that forced me to almost not be a Christian, but look like one. So internally, I had to kind of struggle with that. So that's one of the biggest difficulties. I mean, I don't remember where we started on that question.
Well, the question was, how did you accept it at 19? How did that change your life from there?
Yeah, okay. So the where I started with the light thing was when I was 19, I wasn't necessarily living the best that I could have been. I was in a weird place. Kind of dealt with depression a little bit, and when I was 19, I had a moment of I just want, and this seems to be kind of a cry of our generation a little bit. Kind of the millennial thing is searching for what's real, what's authentic, and I hate to like literally perfectly fall into that stereotype or that type of thing, but honestly, it doesn't bother me that much because it just means that I'm characteristic of me, I guess, if I act like a millennial. Because in that moment, I wasn't necessarily doing the best things. I wasn't necessarily living the best life. I knew how to present as if I was, but I wasn't necessarily doing those things. And I made a choice when I was 19 to flip the switch. And actually, that's when I got this tattoo on my wrist. Which is another highly millennial thing to do.
Get a tattoo.
Yeah, especially on your wrist. And I got it in my handwriting, and it says "from real." Well, it's actually, and it's funny. It's very characteristic of what I'm talking about in the sense of "from real." It's not like it represented very much for me something authentic and to live from a place of only doing and only believing in the things that I could genuinely grab hold of, that were very real to me. But it's also part of a song title, and the song title is "Holiday from Real," and it's a Jack Mannequin song, which is not a good song. Probably not a song that I would let my kids listen to, which is why I didn't get the whole title of it on there. But that whole song is talking about him putting on a front. He just talks about how we'll tell everybody how great it is, but it's actually terrible. We'll explain to everyone back home how awesome these things are, but in the meantime, I'm sleeping on the floor because I can't afford rent, type of thing. And so it's one of those things where that song in that time was very representative to me of like living on the side of representing what's actually happening, and so it meant a lot to me. So it's kind of a favorite song that I don't recommend people listening to. It has some choice language in it, but it's one of those things where, like, to me, that was so real in that moment to go, okay, I'm going to get a tattoo of something that, I wouldn't necessarily tell people to go listen to the song. But there's something about that that was so real for me that I was okay with it, and I still am. It's something that it's one of those things where, like, tattoos go from being black to aging in type of a green, and I have more olive skin, so mine will age probably quicker. But there's something to not ever getting it freshened up, that it just ages with me, so that it's just, and it's also in my handwriting. So it's one of those things where it's like, in that moment, I got a tattoo. It was my birthday. I was 19. Literally, when I turned 19, I got it. That was in July. My mom didn't find out about my tattoo until Thanksgiving, which was surprising. We were driving, and I was driving her car, and I had my left hand on the steering wheel and not my right hand. And so she just had a clear shot of the tattoo. I don't know how she hadn't seen it before then. But then she asked me about it, and I was like, well, it's too late. I've had it for like 4 months. So at that point, but it was one of those things where, like, I got a tattoo, like, kind of out of a rebellion, but almost, it was one of those things where it was like I had to do it. It was one of those things where I kind of stamped myself for moving forward. It's a turning point almost. Like in Scripture, there's a lot of moments where people do something very raw, and then from there they move forward. And it usually gets better from there because it's at kind of a rock bottom place, I guess, or a starting point. The thing that I think of now is like Jacob wrestling with the angel of God, and wrestles all night and doesn't give up. And the angel touches his hip, and he ends up walking with a limp for the rest of his life. But then he becomes Israel, and his descendants go on to have Jesus through the lineage. And it's one of those things where just not giving up on that and being okay with being really honest about it was really important to me in making that shift. So kind of branding allowed me to not just appear in one way, but forced me to be who I actually was. So that was a long way of saying that. But that's the story.
All right, so this is probably an obvious question because your dad was in music and stuff, but what got you into music?
Yeah, so my dad was, he's a really good guitar player. He plays bass as well. He did the choir and stuff for a long time. He can't sing very well, but it's weird because he can hear all the parts and he can hit the notes, but it's like he's talking when he sings. It doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound bad. It's just kind of it's like this guy, I wouldn't want to hear this guy sing, but I also wouldn't mind if he did, So I did kind of grow up with him having guitars around and things like that, and not many. He always jokes about how when they started having kids, he had to sell all of his guitars. He had a couple guitars that would be worth 10, 15 grand now that he bought for like 800. Wow. Just like old Gibsons and things that he bought brand new for so cheap that would be worth so much now if he hadn't sold them. But when I mean that's kind of our parents' generation, and that when things happen, you have to kind of sell off stuff and make happen what needs to happen.
Yeah, I know a lot of older bass players who've been playing like 30, 35, 40 years. They're always like, yeah, I gave up my Fender Jazz.
Yeah.
I regret that.
Yeah,
I was like, why is it always the Fender Jazz?
Well, because that's such an iconic bass,
Yeah.
And the thing is with that, it's like, well, you can just go buy one now for not very much. But the problem is like none of them are as good. All that stuff was all handmade back then, and so it kind of stinks with that stuff. But like my brother's a bass player, and he doesn't play bass very much now because he does so much video and audio and tech stuff that he doesn't really get to play a whole lot. But my dad was a guitar player. I don't know really where drums came in because my core instrument is drums. Part of my job is actually leading worship, so singing and playing guitar. But I always make sure that people know that drums is my first instrument, so that they have kind of lower expectations before I start singing, because it's not always the best. But I kind of gone the other way. I've heard a lot of people talk about having a lot of talent, having to learn kind of the authenticity of it, and I kind of ended up working backwards in the sense of like the desire I had for it and the need that was around me for it kind of had to drive past my talent level. So I kind of had to push past not being the best vocalist or being the best guitar player and just force myself to get better because it was a need at the time when I started playing. So I started playing drums when I was in 6th grade.
FYI, your voice is amazing. It's very unique. So
Thanks, I appreciate that.
throw that out there.
I appreciate that. It's definitely gotten better, I can say that. It's gotten a lot better, and a lot of that stuff is just reps and practicing and things like that. And like going into learning different techniques and different things like that. I mean, one of the things that kills me right now is my breathing when I sing. I learned all that stuff when I was in like mixed choir and stuff in middle school. But you really have to keep up with that. I mean, if I did more breathing exercises, my voice would be a lot stronger. So that's something I definitely need to work on. But yeah, so drums was the first thing. I don't know how that came about. I think I looked up to Sean a lot, which is our pastor's middle son, who went out to Colorado and played at a church.
Okay.
He was the main drummer at Family Worship when I was growing up, and I really looked up to him. Our families were close. So when I was in 6th grade, he gave me lessons for like 6 months or so. And those are the only drum set lessons I've had. But I think that was one of those things where it's just like that outside influence kind of pushed me on that side. I'm really glad I started with drums. It's helped me a lot, especially with leading, because being able to grab the tempo and hold tempo is a big part of that. So yeah.
All right. So what were some of your favorite bands growing up?
Oh man, my wife and I always joke about this because I go back through my old iTunes and stuff and kind of get nostalgic on things. Problem is I was always in like local bands and stuff, and when you're in local bands in a place like Central Florida, you pretty much have a lot of you either have a lot of like hardcore influence because of the like the pop metal scene that happened in Central Florida with like Under Oath and all those guys that kind of came behind them, and then also bands like Copeland, who actually came, like Copeland and Amberlin. So like Copeland was from Lakeland. They're still here, and Aaron's actually a friend of mine now, which was crazy when that happened. It was such a weird, surreal thing. And then Amberlin, Stephen Christian's from Winter Haven. So like that stuff coming up was music that I'd be proud, I guess, to let my kids listen to. But we always joke about like what are the the key bands and stuff that are really going to stick out for our kids when they listen back to this style of music. And the tough thing is, like, some of my favorite nostalgic music is like between 98 and like 2004, when on iTunes there used to be a category called emo, which now has split off into independent music and then like all these subgenres. But it originally was just emo, and it was like one of the 8 genres that were on iTunes. And so that stuff is just like, it's kind of depressing to listen to, unless there were moments that you had during that time when that music came out. So like that's the kind of stuff that's like, I know my kids are gonna hear that, and my wife and I have this song that doesn't really make any sense if you look at the lyrics just raw, but that we love and like has become such a staple for us. I know that our kids are just gonna be like, "What is this? Like, what sound is this? What are they doing? What is wrong with these people?" And those are the bands that like never really got famous. That specific band was the Early November, which is like one of my favorite bands for a while, and they just never got big. We went and saw them on a 10-year anniversary. They kind of did a compilation of a bunch of stuff, and it was just a small show. It was one of those things where it's like, man, these guys are still like 15 years later. They like travel around in a van. The main guy has kids and like has a family and stuff, and like owns a studio and things like that. But it's just weird because it's bands that you think were such a big deal when you were that age just never went anywhere, and then the bands that did, like, you still like them, but like a band like Coldplay. I don't ever want to see Coldplay live because I'd have to see them with 15,000 people, and that just doesn't sound interesting to me. If I could see a band like Coldplay at a theater venue or like House of Blues with like 1,500 people, that'd be awesome. But that's just not. That just doesn't really happen. I think they actually did a theater tour. I know Paramore did, and Paramore's drummer from like the Riot album he's not with them anymore, but he was one of my favorite drummers. They had a band called Forever Changed was a big, and then probably the biggest influence on me was Aaron Gillespie. He was in Under Oath, then the Almost, and he actually just recently toured with Paramore as their drummer, just filled in for them. He has solo stuff and things like that, but his drumming style really influenced me growing up. So,
well, when our youth pastor came in my 10th grade year, he introduced me to Skillet. And before this, like, let me show you how my music influenced. I was born in the Bronx.
Really?
So everything, yeah.
That's
I only
crazy.
lived there for 5 years though.
Okay.
And then I came to Frostproof.
So it's just like
Polk County.
all Jay-Z all the time?
So it was, I just listened to rap all the time.
Yeah.
Till I was.
if you live in the Bronx, why not?
Yeah. But even when we moved to Frostproof, this is middle of nowhere town, Polk County. I still,
that's where the county jail is.
Yeah, that's where I grew up. But I still listen to rap all the way until I started hanging out, till I started skateboarding in the 6th grade.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I started to get introduced to rock. I wasn't like
rock or punk.
Rock.
Okay, like Blink-182.
Like
punk?
Blink-1.
Well,
there's Blink-182. There's
because that's like
Lion
punk
K.
rock. Yeah, that's all punk rock, especially back then.
Yeah. What was it? I'm trying to remember other bands.
Yeah, there's not many from that era that are.
Green Day.
Yeah.
I used to listen to them.
Now they'll be kind of timeless because they had enough wide-ranging hits.
But so
like them and Weezer will be kind of early 2000s remembered, but
there were other bands I just can't remember. Oh, Linkin Park was a big influence on me because it was rap.
Well,
and
there's
rock.
your Skillet, yeah.
And then so when I got when our youth pastor came in and he introduced me to Skillet. Oh, PLD too.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So whenever I got introduced to Skillet, I was like, wow, they're awesome. I'm like, this is a Christian rock band. Like, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
But PLD, apparently PLD was, and we're like, hey, and Switchfoot.
There you go.
I'm like,
Well, Switchfoot wasn't really Christian.
yeah. But
Which people got a lot of like hate for that, but John Foreman's like one of the nicest guys. Like he's such a good guy, even still.
yeah.
But yeah, they always never.
Yeah.
But yeah, Switchfoot is a big deal.
But
And
so
still are, yeah.
I got introduced to Skillet, and then he told me all these other bands too. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I was listening to a lot of Christian rock band before I even came in. But anyways,
but that was back when Christian rap was just awful.
Yeah, people used to get make fun of it all the time. And
yeah, because I mean, all you had was like
Grits.
Yeah,
Toby
Grits. Actually, Grits wasn't that bad.
No, they were good.
Yeah, they actually were pretty good.
Toby Mac, Lecrae started coming out around probably. Yeah. I heard his first album.
So that was after DC Talk.
Yeah, that
Toby
was
Mac
after.
already had his. Yeah, so that's late '90s or.
Toby Mac was already out at this point. My youth pastor,
which he wasn't really rap.
My youth pastor despised Toby Mac.
Did he like DC Talk?
Yeah, he probably not. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Okay, because when he made that switch, a lot of people hated that. Because it was more like rock.
Yeah, so when I got introduced, it was Skillet's Collide album, and I guess at this point, this is when they started doing bigger crowds. They were like touring with other rock bands.
Yeah.
So they started touring with other rock bands, and then I think I've always wanted to see their show, and it wasn't until after I graduated.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after I graduated where I
enlightening moments
actually saw the show, and I was actually this was my time I was still dating my high school sweetheart or whatever.
Okay.
And she was going to Southeastern, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to see Skillet?" I'm like, "You're lying." She was like, "No." At this point, I think I was youth pastoring in Naples too. So.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That's a long drive.
So she was in Lakeland, and she's like, "Do you want to see Skillet?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, they're going to be playing at, I think it was Auberdale Life Church. Now it's Life Church in Auberdale.
But in Auberdale, yeah.
So apparently they were supposed to play at this bigger venue.
Okay.
But the venue, I think either booked something else or, pretty much kicked them out or whatever.
Okay.
So the church,
not enough people or something.
Yeah,
okay.
the church took on the band. So
that's a pretty big church, though.
Yeah,
the auditorium.
So she was like, "It's just $10." I was like, "I'll be there." So I got there. It was on a Friday. I got there on Friday, and I literally was so close that he spit on my face. Like that's how close I was, and that's how so that's why, because now anytime I ever see him, it's in huge crowds.
Right.
Like this was probably just one of the smallest crowds they played in a long time.
Yeah.
But it's like there was no opening bands.
Gotcha.
It was just Skillet.
That's
cool. And I was right there, like at the stage,
That's
and
awesome.
he spit in my face. So I was like, "This is awesome." So
yeah. See, during that time, because I went through a phase of. When I was in local bands and things like that, I went through a phase of not liking a lot of bands that other people liked for the sake of not liking bands other people liked. So that not to say that like the music that I listened to was intentionally terrible, because it wasn't. I ended up finding a lot of stuff that I really loved, like a band like Cool Hand Luke, which not a lot of people know about.
It's a cool name, though.
It's an awesome name. And like the lead singer was like a Phil Collins guy, like he led from the drums. They put the drums out front,
cool.
And it was just like, it was like it kind of like a Sleeping at Last feel. I don't know if you know Sleeping at Last, but
another cool name.
Yeah. So I found a lot of really cool bands during that time, but at the same time, it's one of those things where like my back catalog of music is not really stuff I can share with people because they don't really know any of the bands, because I was intentionally like trying to listen to stuff that no one else listened to, which is really annoying, but I guess it really helped me as far as like, especially in that time period, because I was in a band that was pretty good, and like some of the guys from that band have gone on to be really successful, but we just, you know, played small shows all the time, and it was cool to be able to listen to or go see these smaller bands and things like that. But yeah, during that time, I think the only like real Christian band that I listened to, um, who was like not technically Christian, but they were all Christians, was Under Oath, and that's probably one of the few people that I went to like every show that I could, because they were local, they were Tampa, but they also toured all around. But I remember my dad, because Under Oath was um, like they were technically a screamo band when they first came out. It was a lot heavier when they first came out, and then they started singing more. But I remember my dad being like, "Hey, do you know there's Christian bands that scream?" And I was like, "Yeah, I listened to several of them." And he was like, "Why? That's so insane." And I was like, "It's really not insane. It's just like the style of music." And he just couldn't understand at that time that like there were bands that were Christians who screamed in their songs. It was such a funny thing for me, because I was
Or
like,
if a band didn't say Jesus, they weren't Christian or something like that.
yeah, but even like thematically, a lot of these guys, and I think even actually one of the most famous Under Oath songs was a song that Aaron Marsh from Copeland helped write. He jokes about that being his most famous song, um, but because it really was, it sold the most. And that song did have Jesus in it, but Aaron's kind of an atheist, and so he uh, he has that plaque up in his studio of, I think it sold over 500,000, which is crazy. And he's like, "Yeah, I wrote most of that song." He's like, "Except for all the screaming Jesus stuff," because Spencer comes in at the end, he screams out at the end. It kind of brings it up. They're a great song. I can't remember the name of it right now, but yeah, I just thought that was funny.
All right, so when I asked you what got you in the music, you talked about drums being your first instrument. How many instruments do you actually play right now?
Okay, so when I was in sixth grade, I started playing drums, started taking lessons, doing drums, and I was at this school called Rochelle. I was there elementary and middle school, so I was there for like 9 years because I went preschool as well.
Oh, wow.
So preschool through eighth grade, I was at the same school. Well, it's a magnet school, which means it basically has to have it's government funded, but it's because it has a specific focus. Like McKeel is a local magnet school that's also a private school, but its focus is technology. So they do a lot of technology focused stuff. Um, like all the kids have iPads and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy.
That's cool.
But Rochelle was a art school, it was a school of the arts. So so from in fifth grade, we had to choose majors, which was kind of crazy. Yeah, so like we had to pick an area of expertise basically, and the first thing I chose was art, and I have a lot of like old paintings and things like that I did, and I actually was pretty good at it at the time. Since then, I haven't really. I mean, I do like build graphics and do videos and stuff, so I have like somewhat of a eye for that stuff, but I can't just hand draw stuff anymore. Um, but I did that in fifth grade, and then in sixth grade I switched to band and I did music in middle school. So from sixth grade to eighth grade, I was in band, and then I also took piano classes at school. I was in a mixed choir. I was in a jazz band. So my focus then was percussion. So I learned like every percussion instrument. That's actually when I learned a lot of music theory, because I played mallet instruments. So I play like the marimba or the xylophone or the bells or
Those are pretty cool.
yeah, and I love like I would love to have I would love to have a vibraphone, which is basically like usually they're made of brass, um, and it's like basically like a piano that you hit, but they're made of brass, and then they have a rotating bar on the inside that vibrates it, which you get so it has like a vibrato sound to it that can slow down and then go faster. I'd love to have a set of those. I actually on the Southeastern Worship album, the first one, I actually played those on some of the songs. Was able to play those on some of the songs in the recordings. Um, so that was pretty cool. But a lot of my music theory and the way I imagine chords and structure and things like that is all on a piano. But I don't play piano. The reason why it's like that is because of those mallet instruments. So like the thing that's stopping me from playing piano is my technique. I've never been taught technique wise how to play piano. And because I'm a drummer, my movement in my hands is from my pinky forward. So when I put my hands on a piano, I want to lead with my pinkies instead of with my index finger.
Mm-hmm.
And so my playing is like all backwards. So like all the runs and things like that would all be backwards, which is just, it gets frustrating playing that. But so pretty much any percussion instrument. And then in high school, of course, we always had guitars around my house, so I kind of taught myself guitar slowly. And in high school, the high school started to split off into small groups, and they wanted to like have worship leaders for each small group, which was insane now that I think about it. I don't know how they, but anyways, like I think it was like the 10th and 11th grade class. I did the music for that because they were like, you know music, your dad is in charge of the music, like you can do it. And I was like, okay, but I can't do that. And so that's when I started leading worship. So that's when I started like developing singing and stuff like that. So I play guitar a little bit, but like I'm not a lead guitarist by any means. Take a lot of shortcuts when I play acoustic. But the more I play and the more I do and the more things like that, the better I get. And so really, honestly, I think it's just any percussion instrument is my strongest suit. And I can play a little bit of guitar. And I haven't quite gotten the pattern of bass in my head as far as like where the actual notes are. But if I had to play bass, I could. Not on the fly. I would need some preparation time. And then, so that, and then like maybe synth stuff, like lead synth lines. Like I said, I can't really play piano. So anything that allows me to cheat a little bit.
So which one, if someone said this is the only instrument you can play, which one would you play?
It would definitely be kit. It would definitely be drum set. Yeah, because I also I don't really like being out front. That's not something that's not a part of it that I really like. I like the idea of being behind a drum set. And then I like leading though. And that's something that I learned from behind a drum set, like especially in like, like in bands and then like in worship music and things like that. The drummer kind of takes you where you're going.
Yeah.
I mean, the leader who's singing can do that to some extent, but like you kind of have to follow the drummer, especially the bass player does. So, so I think from that, like I like leading, but I don't necessarily like being out front. That's why I like singing without a guitar makes me feel weird because I don't have anything in front of me. So,
where do you see your music going? Do you see it just staying at the church? Do you see yourself doing other things?
I've been able to work on several projects that I'm really proud that I got to work on, and people that I've been able to kind of fill gaps for to help them take the next step. I really like doing that. Like I said, I don't really like being the one out front. Like if I could be a drummer for a band, that would be cool. And I have been that. And I actually did have an opportunity to do that. But I didn't want to take it because my life was leading me somewhere else that has been way better. But I think, I don't know, I think supporting a lot of that stuff, doing stuff in church, and then I have friends that write a lot at different churches and do different things like that, people that I've written with. We've done some of the stuff that I've written. So I think writing and kind of collaborating with that. And then also, I like the idea of, as far as musically where I want to go, I'd like to go in the direction of helping other people enjoy the talent that they started with. So like kind of going in the direction of people that kind of find themselves talented in music already, to kind of lead them towards an opportunity for them to be successful in doing it. So that kind of seems to be where I want to go. Now I'd love to like write crazy songs that go all over the place, you know, but I would almost rather do that with people. I have some friends that I really love that I haven't been able to write with in a long time, just because distance and things like that. But you know, technology allows us to kind of do that a little bit more, and so hopefully I'll be able to do that in the future. So write more and really kind of help push people towards doing more of what they are already talented doing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, the Bible says, you know, there's many ways to worship God: prayer, you know, acts of, you know, service and stuff, and worship, you know, playing an instrument. Why is that important to you? Or why is it important?
The worship side of it?
The worship side of it.
It's important to me because, like, I believe that one of the coolest things to me is how poetic the Old Testament is, and especially Genesis, and how, you know, it starts out talking about man being made in the image of God. And the fall happens, and then chapter 3, genealogy kind of starts again. And when it does, it still says that Adam was made in the image of God. So it's one of those things where it's like, even after the fall, there's still this indication that man is made in the image of God. So for me, you know, the Bible kind of talks about the Lord will fulfill the desires of your heart, but then it also talks about Him placing them there. So I have a desire to play music and to sing and to play drums and things like that. And because I believe what the Bible says, then on a logical explanation, I desire to do those things because that desire was placed in me by the God that I'm made in the image of. So therefore, if that's the case, then the math equation looks like my most complete life is doing the desire that was placed within me by the God I've created in the image of, for the God I was created in the image of. So it's like kind of turning back around and giving back to who gave me what I love. So to me, it's important for the aspect of thankfulness. And there's also a deeper, there's like a, I don't know, there's within worship, leading and playing music and things like that, there's a place that I can't go with anything else. Meaning that there's times when I don't say anything and I'm playing drums or I'm playing guitar, and it's the most praise that I can give in that moment. It feels like this is the most that I can do. Like this is the loudest I can pray, or this is the most that I can give back. Just that moment. Sometimes there's just those highest moments, and those for me have only happened in worship. I've been able to play a lot of shows and other things, and you have those really cool moments where the band kind of locks in, things like that. But there's nothing the same as when the band locks in with a whole room that's also worshiping God.
Yeah.
You know, it's totally different because the fact that the whole room knows what's going on and moves towards that is it just feels real. Like it feels authentic at the moment. And the tough thing with that is that not everybody in the room is acting authentic at the moment. Sometimes I'm not acting authentic, but there's something about the whole room pulling that together that forces me to do so. Meaning, like, I may not be authentic in that moment, but as these things are conspiring and the room is kind of moving towards worshiping, it changes me, and it does something to me that I couldn't do on my own. It takes me to a place, the room itself, the people in the room help me get somewhere that I just wasn't before. Um, and then other times I'm part of that. So to me, it's a cool thing because it involves more than just me doing it. So I think that's one of the most important things, the thing that I like about it the most.
I always thought like this, I know God has given us our talents and stuff, and my thing is, if He's given to us, then why not use it, to for Him? He's instilled it in us,
Yeah.
and He's given us desire to play, so why not do it for Him? And as far as like, you saying being, at that moment you weren't authentic, like, I remember because I played with a Christian band for like in 2011 for like 6 months or whatever. Then some other stuff I'm not getting to happen, but
Yeah.
anytime we'd go out, like I would literally disappear before, like I'd set up my stuff and I'd disappear and I'd just go pray. It's like, I know this is a Christian rock band, God, but I don't want it to feel like I'm just up there playing
Sure.
because you've given me these talents to play.
Yeah.
And I know it's a different atmosphere from worship or whatever, but if I know like before we go up and play worship in the youth, I'm volunteering.
Right.
If I had the option of, just going back and preparing myself, not only getting that the week stuff out of your head or the day stuff out of your head and just get into that worship mode, I would do it, but I'm volunteering and all this stuff is happening. So, when you go up to the stage, I think it takes that everybody in the room to kind of bring you to
Yeah.
that moment,
Yeah, and I don't think that there's I don't think that there's necessarily a right way, I guess, to approach the stage.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that there is. The problem is
it's probably different for everybody.
right. The problem is you don't always have the time for that.
Yeah.
Like the thing is like, so for instance, if I'm leading worship in the main sanctuary, then I've got to make sure the youth is good before I head over and practice for the main sanctuary. And then I've got to kind of go back and make sure everybody's in place and production and stuff like that. And then I got to jump in and do the main service. So like, there's not really time within that, and so I think one of those things is it's less of a make sure that you have the 20 minutes or the 15 or 10 minutes before you play, and kind of stretch it out and make it more of a make sure that when you get up in the morning, the same way that like you should, as a vocalist, one of the first things you should do is warm your voice up just every day, just because talking is bad for your vocals. So it's like, it's one of those things where like it doesn't necessarily matter as much that 20 minutes before, but it's more so matters for all of the other time outside of that 20 minutes before, and that's why it is good to kind of stop and go, hey guys, let's pray for a second. Like we only have 30 seconds, but let's pray so that we remember what we're doing. Because in a lot of ways, even if you're not being authentic in that moment because of whatever just happened or what has been happening, you want to try and make sure that some of the people on the stage with you at least are, or have the opportunity for that. Because even though the room kind of pulls that together, it's those on the stage that kind of throw out that first net, that kind of try and bring all that stuff in. So yeah, I mean, I think it is important to do that beforehand, but the reality is that
I usually do it because I know I can't. I do it before I enter the building, and I just have my mindset the whole time. and I try not to get into anything that's going to take my mindset off. Because when I'm there, you know, I know my calling is for young people, but I also know my calling is for worship.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, I'm doing what I'm called to do, you know. So it's like I have to be prepared for, you know, youth and worship both.
Yeah.
So I just keep in mind why I'm actually there.
Right. So
I tend to sometimes, if I'm not around the kids or if I'm not around anybody, I tend to not talk as much. It's probably he's a loner, but that's just how it is. That's how I comprehend everything that's going on. So I'm not like getting unfocused.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
All right. So you work with the youth worship team and stuff. What is your goal to teach the next? Like, what are some of your goals as you teach the next generation of worshipers going up?
I think
coming up.
Honestly, I think for me, it's less about the music and more about where the kids are. Because the reality is that, you know, if we play for maybe 15 minutes on a Sunday, you know, we have probably between an hour and 2 hours of practice in a week. So you might play 2 hours a week together. But where people really need, and this is something that's like just church wide, you know, it's one of those things where like with your youth pastor coming up and telling you, hey, you know, my wife and I and Jesus really love you, like we genuinely love you, like that did more for you than probably most of his sermons. So the thing is like, and I'm not saying that the sermons are not important because those backed up what he said.
Yeah.
So because of that, it was one of those things where he was able to be an influence to you because you believed him, you trusted him, things like that. So I think for me, it's less of a musical, I want to make sure, like, I desire for this person to be a better guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I do desire that, I'm not necessarily the one to teach that because I need to be a better guitar player too. Now I could do that with drums and stuff like that. I'd be more confident in kind of pushing that on drums and different things like that. But I think the most important thing to me is, especially with youth music, you know, what do these kids need in their life that they don't already have? My prayer is more of what things can I say or small acts that I can do that will influence this person towards better things in their life. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, because of all of the other time that they spend doing multiple other things. You know, the 2 hours a week that we're playing music together is such a small part of their week. And so my biggest thing is, you know, who can I text or email or say something to or give something to that will change maybe the direction of their week or their day, that will then kind of snowball into maybe they'll start to think differently about the people that they're around, you know? Like, how can I influence musicians not to be ego-driven, you know? How can I influence people not to be so caught up in how good they are? And one of the good things about worship is it doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah.
I'm a prime example of that as far as, like, my actual talent level ability, in the sense that, like, I have to lead out more in the desire of the moment of wanting to worship God rather than my ability to play guitar really well, you know? So I think for me, the influence level of what things can I do for these kids outside of the 2 hours of playing music, that will help them in all of the other time that they're not at church, you know?
All right. Next question, kind of deals with that. Like, how would you instill to them that worship is more than just playing a gig or playing. Because a lot of them, when they start playing, oh, I want to learn to pick up guitar, so they pick up guitar, and they're like, oh, they're just so excited about it. And like, how do you instill that it's not like playing a gig, but more just like worshiping God? Like, you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think one of the tough things with that is kind of goes back to the same thing of like taking the 20 minutes before you play. Is just the reality is that sometimes you have to fight not having time, because the easiest thing, as part of my job, the easiest thing for me to do is spend any time that I have focusing on making sure everybody's playing exactly the right notes, hitting the right beats. And to me, that stuff is secondary. So, like, I would rather water down a song and everybody on stage learn a little bit more about worship. Because it's not, like, playing a gig is playing a gig. It's not, it has nothing to do with worship. Unfortunately, there's been multiple times in my life where I've played a gig and that gig was playing worship songs. Yeah. I've been paid for that a lot. There's a lot of places that do pay for that. And that's fine. I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's the point. Like, I don't think the point is to have the best musicians, and so therefore we pay those people in order to get the best musicians. But I think it's more so of how can we grow our current community, and within that, looking at the most important side of taking those moments and going, okay, this is not a gig. Like, we can have fun with some certain things and play things like we're playing a gig. Mm-hmm. But within the worship times, like, that's why, like, especially one of the things that I like to do is kind of separate that in the sense of within a worship set, if we're playing 4 fast songs and we're playing 1 slow song and probably have like some tag of another song, typically kind of treat the front half, the fast songs, more like you're playing a gig. And then I try to, just because time is so limited, it's easier to say, okay, let's focus on the top songs, the fast songs, and really nail down those parts and get better at playing fast things or get better at working together as a band. On the worship side of things, kind of go, all right, let's slow down and pay attention to what you're playing, but also learn how to forget about what you're playing. So I think one of the things for me is doing that, and then also flipping it. Sometimes being able to do do that on the fast stuff when the fast things are more familiar. So I think a lot of the ways that I try and teach that stuff is within how I run practices, trying to move the song forward, not in a technical sense, but in a how does this become engaging and how is it least distracting? Because, like, for instance, I'm not a big fan of guitar solos in worship songs, because to me, a guitar solo is about the guitar, and worship is not about the guitar. And so that's just, and I'm not saying like a purist thing, but sometimes worship songs need some type of musical lift, but all of that stuff is secondary to me, and especially with youth, I try and cut a lot of that stuff out so that there's more emphasis on the worship side of it. So, like, sometimes, and that's why if people come prepared knowing that stuff, then we'll play it. But if people aren't prepared before the practice, then I cut it because it's not important. But if they know it ahead of time, then I want to honor that in the sense of, like, you took time to practice this because you wanted to play it. Well, that means we won't have to take time out of practice, which
teaching.
Right, because I don't want to spend time in practice teaching technical things. I'd rather spend time in practice teaching how to worship. So that's I think that's probably the best way on that, I guess.
I remember when I first started playing them, probably about a year, 6 months ago. Whenever they had like the band, when Lindsay was there, she had like appoint a band director or whatever, and then we go talk about the service. And I remember when I first got there, they were all scared to mess up. Like it was, oh, I messed up. Oh my goodness, like they freak out. And I remember when just the first time I've ever was the band director. I was like, you've prepared, you've practiced, we've had sound check, we practiced Tuesday. At this point, it's just let God take over. Just just go up there and worship. If you mess up, you mess up. Like I mess up all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's just how it is. I was like, if I don't memorize my music, I have a mild dyslexia, so the notes will flip on me, and I'll play the other notes. So that's when I play wrong notes is because I'm staring at my paper. So it's if I don't memorize it, then yeah, I'm gonna play a wrong note.
Yeah.
And then it's like they got it and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I prepared. I'm good. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And then it's like once you tell them it's okay to mess up because that's not what it's about.
Right.
It's like their whole attitude changes.
Yeah.
It's more about worship. So.
Right.
All right. So at the end of the podcast, I'm getting to prayer and stuff. How important is prayer to you?
I think it's very important in the sense of like close friends. So if I don't talk to my close friends, then they're not close anymore. They become distant. And it's cool because there are those friends that are just such nice people and they're good-hearted people. And maybe you've had a really deep experience with that person or several people that you can go long distances without talking to them. And you pick back up and it's like nothing ever changed. Well, that has nothing to do with anything other than that person's just really nice and they're forgiving of the distance.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where like the same thing with God, with prayer. It's like if my life is influenced by Scripture and by the Holy Spirit leading, then in the same way that you had to look up the directions to get to my house to do this podcast, it's the same type of thing. If I want to be led by the Holy Spirit and live from the words of God and live a good example and also live just a good life, I need to know where I'm going. And so to me, prayer is important in the sense of it's my MapQuest or it's my Google Maps or my Apple Maps. It's not necessarily telling me where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do, but at the same time it is. I don't necessarily wake up in the morning and go, all right, God, which left do I need to take? Which right do I need to take to get to where I'm going? But I also do that in the sense of, give me the wisdom to say the things that I need to say. Give me the patience to kind of slow down and deal with people that are frustrating me. And then also give me grace from those people who I'm frustrating. And that's why I love the Lord's Prayer so much, because it kind of walks through all of those, kind of gives you both sides of those things. And it's one of those things where prayer is important to me because it reminds me of what I need to do to move forward and treat people well. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is prayer helps me treat people nice. It helps me treat people like people should be treated, like the image of God around me should be treated. Because one of the things I love about the image of God is that if everyone is made in the image of God, even those who don't believe in God have a piece of God within them. So prayer, to me, is that moment of saying, God, as I go throughout my day, open my eyes up to you around me. And then those people who don't know that they're made in your image, show me the thing within them that is you that I can point out that lets them know that they are made in your image. So to me, prayer is important because it's that roadmap. It's that instruction. It's that reminder. It's that the movement. It's kind of the pavement that you walk on. So yeah, that's why like prayer in the car or just in your head is so important to me, because it's always good to get an instruction on the next thing to do.
And if you want to get to know God more, prayer helps you with that as well.
It does.
Like when you get to know somebody and they become your best friend, the only way you're going to know God's voice and know His direction is you got to know His, you got to spend time with Him.
Yeah.
So you can, okay, that's God.
Well, and my favorite thing too I love the image of God. When I was in college, I tried to do a lot of work on just the image of God. And one of the things I like about the image of God, and the reason I talk about it like this, is because if everybody after the fall is still represented as made in the image of God, then that means each person is made in the image of God. And if each person is made in the image of God and they don't believe in God, then there's something within them that is characteristic of God. Well, each person is individually made, meaning that no two faces are alike. The whole concept of like snowflakes. No two snowflakes are alike. Such a cool idea. Well, how many snowflakes are there? And more than that, how many people have there been? So to me, the more people that you can find and get to know and find that piece of God within them, the bigger God gets to you. You know what I mean? Because if I look at one person and they have one characteristic of God within them that makes them who they are pretty much, then knowing two people means I know twice as much about what God looks like. And then more so than that, prayer helps me to go, what's the characteristic of God that I carry or that I can carry to show out to people, so that when people do look at me or talk to me, that they see more of you, and hopefully with the people that I'm surround myself with, that us together, they can see even more of you, because we're each individually showing a different representation of who you are. So to me, that's why I love Image of God so much, and like why prayer is so important for myself to kind of be postured in that way. So yeah.
I was thinking of something. Like I'm, my background isn't, I didn't grow up in church or anything, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, but that helps me to see that if I'm not perfect, then nobody else is, and that also helps me to see that, it's hard when your life, you do have mistakes because you're your biggest critic,
Yeah.
but you know what God thinks about you. You know that God thinks you're worth it, that you're great, that you're amazing.
Yeah.
It's hard for you to see yourself that way, but I think the more time you spend with God and the more you see how He sees you, the more you can look at somebody that, to you may annoy you, but God loves that person.
Right.
God thinks that person is amazing.
Yeah.
And, I'm the type of person that even if someone kind of annoys me, I always try to see, always think, well, this is God's child too.
Mm-hmm.
And always try to see something that I can like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
You may not like everything about one person, but there may be, maybe 2 or 3 things that you do and one that you don't.
Yeah.
So just having that relationship with God and knowing how He sees you helps you to see others.
Right.
Same way.
Alright guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed part 1. Stephen is a pretty cool guy. We went into a lot of bunny trails, but it was a fun interview. And I'm enjoying podcasting, and I've only done 2 interviews, but so far I've these, interviewing people and getting to know people and getting to know what God has done in their lives has been a real blessing for me. After the first episode, at the end I talked about testimony. I'm going to talk about prayer, but I'm going to wait to episode 2. I'm in this next episode, with the second part episode with Stephen. I'm going to talk about prayer a little bit. But, so this is not too long. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. I hope you guys were blessed. Just to get to know that, Christians aren't all the same. We're all different. We all come from all walks of life. And God will, God has done many miracles in everybody's life. And everyone has a different story. And I hope you enjoy these stories from these people that I will be interviewing, because I want you to see Christians from a different, from all different walks of life. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got the most out of it. Be blessed. And until next week, this is Nick Jeremy, and I do talk too much.